What's up guys, it's Ash here and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video guys, we've got some custom tactics and player instructions for the 4-4-2 formation, but just before we get started, I'd very much appreciate it if you could drop this video a thumbs up as it does help me a lot. It's team of the season, so if you guys need any coins, make sure you check out MMOXP.com. Their link is down in the description. They're fast, cheap and reliable, and if you use my code Rema, you can get yourself a nice 5% discount. Okay guys, so starting off with the custom tactics, for the defensive start, I like to have this on balance. This is because it gives you the greatest control over your defenders, where you're able to press when you need to press, but then when you want to drop off, be a little bit more passive, you're also able to do so. This isn't possible with the other settings as such, but if you feel more comfortable using something like press after possession loss, that is also fine. Now moving on to the defensive width, I like to have this on about 45 at the moment. This is so we can primarily defend the central and narrow areas, which is super important, but the reason we don't have the width like super low is because we still need to have a little bit of natural width to cover the wider area in case an opponent goes down the wing. That is why we don't have the width too low, but it is important to keep your defense narrow. Now moving on to the depth, I like to have this on about 60. This is because it's a really nice balanced defensive line where we're not constantly getting pinned back because our defensive line is like super deep, and we're not always getting through balled and caught out either because our defensive line isn't ridiculously high. We kind of have a nice balanced defensive line where sometimes we can sit a little bit deeper and other times we can press a little bit higher depending on what the situation is. Now moving on to build up play guys, at the moment I'm really enjoying using fast build up. This is because I'm able to put fast passes together and build up the play a lot more quickly. This has been super useful for me as sometimes I can be a little bit impatient and I don't just want to play like super slow boring football. So fast build up's been really nice for me, but you can use like something like balanced if you want. That's probably still the most meta option, but fast build up, give it a go, let me know what you think. Moving on to chance creation guys, I suggest using direct passing. This is because it is the most meta option. Basically your attacking players will bunch up against the defenders, so you can do the really overpowered 1v1 isolation plays. This isn't possible with the other settings, and you also get the extra pass option in the box, meaning you can guarantee the goals because your players are making those extra movements. So direct passing super important in my opinion. Moving on to the attacking width, I just have this the same as the defensive width. I have it on about 45. The reason for this is because I don't want to have like a super narrow width, otherwise it feels like my players are sat on top of each other, and on the flip side I don't want to have a super like wide width, otherwise it feels like your players are way too far apart and it's very difficult to just string together a few passes. So I kind of just like to go for something in between. As for players in the box, I like to have this on 6. This is so we can get some players into the box, but we don't overcommit the entire team to the point where we get counter-attacked. As for corners and free kicks, I have these both on 1 because there is a corner kick routine that I use which requires these to be on 1. There is a link to that in the top right hand corner of the screen. Now moving on to the players you want to use guys, in the 2 striker positions, because this is a 2 striker formation of course, you can kind of go for a balance between the 2 strikers. So what I like to do is go for a creative player on the left and then a more finisher poacher style player on the right hand side. This is so we've got like a creative finisher dynamic, and I feel like you get a lot more out of the strikers this way. If you use 2 one-dimensional like poacher strikers, for example Haaland and Kane, you're limited to just playing things like through balls and crosses because they don't have the technical ability to do other things as such. So I like to go for a balance between the 2 as I feel like you get a lot more out of the attack. Now moving on to the left mid and right mid, you're going to want to use like good winger style players. These are obviously players that are very quick, have really good dribbling, decent skill moves, crossing and shooting, and you really don't have to worry about their defensive stats. So defensive stats are obviously a bonus if they have really good defensive stats. Of course they're going to do a better job defensively in this role, but it's definitely not a necessity. You know, Saka's got decent defending, but you don't have to have somebody with really good defending. Just use like a really good winger player and you will be fine. Moving on to the left centre mid, I like to go for a more defensive minded midfielder. This is somebody that is going to stay back, break up the play and make sure we're sound defensively. So you're going to want somebody with a medium high work rate if you can get it, as you get the maximum contribution in defence and they're not too bothered about going forward. As for the right centre mid, I like to go for a more box to box style player. This is somebody that is going to attack and defend, so if you can get it, a high work rate is super useful as you get the maximum contribution in attack and defence, but just ensure that this player has a nice well-rounded card. Moving on to the fullbacks, I like to go for a balance between the 2, so I like to have Roberto Carlos at left back, who's my more attacking minded fullback. This is somebody that's actually going to contribute going forward forward for us and offer us something in attack. And then my right back is Cafu, who's a little bit more defensively sound, but maybe lacks that attacking ability. So I just like to have that balance. You guys don't have to. As for the centre backs, these just need to be meta defenders that are quick, strong, medium, high work rate, and yeah, you know the types of defenders you should be using. And honestly, the goalkeeper does not matter. Now, moving on to the player instructions, guys. On the strikers, I have them on stay central and mixed attack. We have them on stay central because we don't want them drifting off into the wider areas. They are our strikers, so we do need them to be central. They always need to be in the correct position, so we can always call upon them when we need them. If we have them drifting out wide, they're not going to be too much use for us. We also have them on mixed attack, as I feel like you get a lot more out of the strikers this way. They get more involved in the build-up, and they just seem to make more dynamic runs and movements. If you put them on getting behind, they're very one-dimensional and they'll just make the same runs in behind all the time, and it's super predictable to play against. So mixed attack is the way to go in my opinion. Now, moving on to the right mid and the left mid, we have them both on comeback on defense, cut inside, getting behind, and get into the box for cross. We have them on comeback on defense, so they always keep the correct shape when we don't have the ball. If you have them on basic defensive support, sometimes these players can be a little bit lazy and they don't fill the correct positions. It can feel a bit like a 4-2-4 at times, so we always want to ensure that they're in the correct position, so we put them on comeback on defense. It also makes it easier to attack when we get the ball back because they're in the correct position, if that makes sense. We also have them on cut inside, so they do look to get into those narrow spaces, those nice pockets, and really bother your opponent. It's super useful to have this option on, in my opinion, because it's very difficult to defend against. We also have them on getting behind, so they're always looking to make those runs. If we have them on balance support, sometimes these players can be a little bit static and you don't get much movement out of them, so I do suggest getting behind, as I feel like you get a lot more out of these players. We also have them on get into the box to cross, as I feel like it makes them more involved in the attack. If you have them on balance crossing runs, sometimes they feel a little bit too passive and they don't do too much, so get into the box to cross means you're going to get the most out of these players. Moving on to the left centre mid, we have him on stay back while attacking and cover centre. We have him on stay back while attacking, as he is a defensive player. We don't want him going forward, so we just have him on that. And then we have him on cover centre, so he does defend as in the central area, Now, moving on to the right centre mid, the more box-to-box player, we have him on default settings and cover centre. We have him on the default settings because we don't really want to restrict him all that much. We kind of want him to have a bit of a free roll. The only important thing is that we have him on cover centre, so he does defend those central areas. Now, moving on to the fullbacks, for my more attacking fullback, I have him on balanced attack and overlap. Now, this kind of goes hand in hand with the instructions I have on the left mid and right mid. So you can see we have them on cut inside, which means sometimes they're going to run a little bit more narrow. But by putting this fullback on balance attack and overlap, we then have a wider option down the wing as well, because, you know, the left mid is not covering that wider area. They're running inwards into the narrow spaces. So this leaves space for the fullback to run down the wing and make the overlapping runs. So we have a wide and narrow option at the same time. Super useful, super difficult to defend against. Now, for my right back, my more defensive minded fullback, we have him on stay back while attacking and overlap. We have him on stay back, so we always have at least 3 defenders back, and we have him on the overlap run type for the same reason as the left back. When we go forward with this player, if we trigger him on a run with like L1 or something, he's going to make the overlapping runs to add extra width and a wider option. As for the centre backs and the goalkeeper, these are on the default settings and I do not touch them. But yeah, guys, they're my custom tactics and player instructions for the 4-4-2. If you have enjoyed, found it useful, please be sure to drop this a thumbs up, sub to the channel if you are new, and don't forget to turn on notifications. And with all that aside, guys, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.